Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Persistence Outdoors podcast. Today, I want to jump right in and start off with a question, and that is what piece of your hunting kit contributes the most to your success? Well, maybe that's easy for you, and you say, it's my rifle. Without my rifle, I wouldn't be killing animals. So obviously, it's my weapon. Or you might be a big fan of binoculars and you understand how much binoculars help you when you're in the field. So you'd say, it's my binoculars. Or maybe you're more of a pragmatist and you say, it's my boots. Without my boots, I'm not getting anywhere that I need to go. So obviously, my boots contribute the most to my success. Well, today I'm going to argue that a mapping app, a hunt-specific GPS mapping app, is right up there in terms of value when it comes to helping you become more successful in the field. So I'm going to go over all the different ways a mapping app can help you and all the ways that I use a mapping app when I'm hunting and preparing to hunt. Now, there's many GPS mapping apps out there that are tailored to hunters. The most popular, I think, are Hunt and GOHUNT Maps. But I know there's others out there like HuntWise, HuntStand, BaseMap. I use Onyx Hunt, but I think the features that we talk about today will be pretty applicable across the board. The first way in which a GPS mapping app is super helpful is just finding a place to hunt in the first place. You could have all the motivation in the world to go hunt. You could have the gear, you could have your tag, you could have your season picked out, whatever. But if you don't know where to go, you're not going to hunt. Many of us live in suburban or urban areas, so we're not necessarily familiar with the land that we are hunting until we get out there. And if you don't live in a rural area, you're not having that experience of seeing animals crossing the road or going camping and seeing animals or hiking and just kind of being familiar with some of these different places you could hunt and maybe the types of places that animals are in. If you are in a suburban or urban area, it's so helpful to have a mapping app that you can open up and immediately identify some places that are open to hunting. Funny story, when I was a kid, I remember using the internet trying to find places within biking distance from my house where I could go fishing. And I was looking for lakes and rivers. And I just think about if I had a mapping app back then, it would have been so much easier to quickly identify places where I could have gone fishing. Now, the funny part is my whole time growing up, I lived like within miles of the ocean and I never got into saltwater fishing. So it's super ironic, but I just think about being a kid and how helpful it would have been to have a mapping app back then. With a mapping app, you can easily identify national forest land, BLM land, lumber company land, and even farms that might be friendly to hunting. And that's just so valuable, especially when you're first getting into hunting and you don't have spots you've been to before, or maybe you don't know people who have their own spots that they can take you to. Another way that a mapping app is helpful is that it can help you distinguish between private and public lands. So once you've determined an area to go hunt, you can go out, but there's still a chance that there's private land or different boundaries that you need to be aware of. And that's where a mapping app is so valuable. You can go out and walk around this unit and you can just look at your phone and immediately know if you're near a private land boundary or not. One thing that you'll find out after hunting enough is that animals often like to be on private land because usually it means there's less hunting pressure. There's fewer people who might come and kill them, right? So they get the sense that they're safer on private land, and they know that if they just walk over that boundary, they don't know where the boundary is, but they know that if they walk over there, people can't get to them. So they do that. So you might find yourself hunting near private land boundaries pretty often. And that's when it's just so great to have your mapping app because you know exactly where you can go and where you can't. Now, one caveat to that is mapping softwares can be incorrect. They get better all the time, they get updated, but there's a possibility that they can be incorrect. So if you see an inconsistency with your map and what signage is telling you on the ground, I think the safest thing is to respect the signage in the area. If it says no trespassing, just take their word for it. You can update that with the software developers of your map later. But I would recommend follow the posted signage until you've verified in a different way that the area is open to the public. The next thing a hunt mapping app is helpful for is e-scouting. Now, you could have a whole entire podcast on e-scouting in and of itself. You could even have a podcast on e-scouting for a certain animal in a certain season. But I'll give a high level overview of what e-scouting is. E-scouting is basically the process of narrowing down a unit or an area to find places that have a high probability of holding animals. The way you do this is searching for certain factors that might indicate animals would be there. For example, in an October rifle elk season, we know that elk tend to like grassy south slopes where it's getting a little bit more sun and there's more likely to be food. We know that they like timber cover that they can go bed down in the day. We know that they like certain terrain features like benches, converging ridges, finger ridges, saddles. All of these things they use for bedding or for getting around in the mountains. And we know that they don't like to be bothered. So if we find an area where it's hard to get to, it's a grassy south slope, it has nearby timber cover, and there happens to be a saddle nearby, that's a great place to go look for elk. And we can find all of that just by opening up our mapping app and spending some time looking around. You can do the same thing for turkeys, for example. So if you're looking for turkeys on a map, you might look for a field that they might go feed in, and then maybe there's a field that has a little brush on the edges, and then there's a stream, and across the stream there's a slope, and on that slope there's a big stand of hardwood trees that they might go and roost in. That's like a perfect place to find turkeys, right? Because they can roost in those trees. They have some security with that stream and with those tall hardwood trees. And then they might come down and fly over that stream and land near the field or in the field. And just by combining all those elements together, you know that there's a higher likelihood that there's turkeys right there than in another place that doesn't have all those elements. E-scouting is a great way to break down a unit and find the places that are most productive for you to actually hunt. Especially out west, you may be looking at units that are thousands of acres, and it's really helpful to be able to break these units down and find the most productive areas without just having to go out and hike through miles and miles of woodlands just to find the spots that you can actually find from your phone. Once you've found some of these spots, it's then good to confirm with boots on the ground or maybe some glassing to help make sure that your assumptions about this area are correct. Something that ties in with e-scouting is route planning. Say you found on your map something that looks like a perfect pocket for elk in that season when the bulls are breaking off from the herds and going to higher elevations. So it seems like it's the right elevation, it has food, it has security. Now you need to find out how to get there. Well, With a mapping app, you can quickly find the nearest road or trailhead and then find out how long it takes you to drive or walk there. You might also find that there's a very close road, but it's a super steep, cliffy hike from that road to where you want to go. So with a mapping app, you might actually find that there's a better access point somewhere else. It might be a longer hike, but it might be a better route to actually get into where you want to go. That's just the beauty of having these aerial maps, is that you can see terrain, you can see vegetation, you can see elevation with the topographical lines turned on. And it's just such a valuable resource for actually finding ways to access the animals once you've determined where they are likely to be. We've talked about some ways that mapping apps can be helpful in preparing for and planning your hunt, but they can also be very helpful when you're in the field. Most apps will let you download maps, which can then be used in the field without a cell service connection. The downloaded map and your phone's built-in GPS work together so that you can see exactly where you are at almost all times. onX Hunt will also show you which direction your phone is pointing. If you hit a little icon, it will show you, just like when you're using a mapping app for driving directions, it will show you which way it's pointing. And so if you're looking across a canyon or something and you're trying to determine where on the map this animal is that you're looking at, you can hit that little icon and it will show you kind of what direction you're looking at. And then you can use that in the topo lines to figure out exactly where that animal is and where you need to go next. Mapping apps can also act like a compass, and they can also help you find ranges, whether that's a distance that you're about to go hike, or even when you're ranging an animal. Say you don't have a rangefinder, but you do have a mapping app, you could say, I know this animal is across the field at that tree line. You can see how far that distance is from you to that animal, and you'll know whether you can make that shot or not. Side note, preferably you would do that before, so you know preemptively how far you can shoot based on different landmarks. Another handy feature that at least onX has is the tracker, and the app will track you via GPS where you go. So this is super helpful if you find a trail that's not marked in your map, but you want to use it in the future, or if you've found a spot where you're hanging a stand and you want to know just how fast you can get from your truck to the stand, you can track yourself going out to your truck. Or I often use it for workouts when I'm just rucking with my backpack. I just want to keep track of how far I've gone and how fast I'm going. The tracking feature is helpful for all of those things as well. Something that I've noticed that is not really an advertised or maybe intended feature of a mapping app is that they help me learn terrain and animal behavior. What I mean is, maybe I'm in the field and I see a deer, and I think, okay, why was that deer here? Out of all the places it could have been, why was it here? And I do some backwards engineering, and I'll open up my map and I'll start seeing consistencies in where deer tend to hang out. You can also correlate what the land you're in looks like on aerial imagery. So I was out looking for elk and I found this place where there was so much elk sign. So I went to mark it on my map. And what was interesting was the area that I was standing in had lots of green grass. But on my map, it showed up as kind of a medium brown color amongst trees. Well, that was super helpful for me because if I hadn't known, I would have looked on my map for areas that were green. But now I know that areas that show up as this brown color in aerial imagery likely have good grass that elk might like to feed on in these stands of timber. Another example is once I was sitting on a field edge waiting for deer to enter a field. And I was in a place that was advantageous for the wind. And I thought that I was near where the deer would come out into the field. Well, they didn't come out where I expected. They actually came out further into the field, maybe 100 yards away. And I was hunting with a crossbow at the time. So that was too far for me to make a shot. Well, what I found later looking on the maps was that the spot where they came out actually had just a tiny ridge across this pretty much flat field. It was maybe a couple feet higher than all the other places in the field. And that tiny ridge was enough to influence their behavior. So that's what I mean when I talk about learning terrain in animal behavior. Being able to correlate and connect these different behaviors in these different areas to what you're seeing on aerial imagery is really helpful, and you can extrapolate it to find more animals in the future. The last super helpful feature of an app like onX Hunt is the ability to place waypoints. This is such a foundational feature that maybe I should have mentioned it first, but it's great to be able to drop a pin on things when you're hunting, whether that's a spot where you've seen animals or a terrain feature or where you parked your car or where your camp is. Any of these things, it's helpful to just be able to drop a pin, and then you can reference that pin in the future, or you can send it to a friend so they're all on the same page with you. In my onX Maps, I have pins of animals I see all the time, whether it's when I'm out hunting or scouting, or when I'm just driving along and I notice animals by the road. I'll drop a pin on there, and then I organize all my pins into folders. So once a certain season comes around, say waterfowl season comes around and I want to go hunt waterfowl, well, now I have a bunch of little data points of where I've seen ducks or where I've seen geese, and I can pull up that folder and show all of those on my maps. And then I have an idea of where these animals hang out and where I might want to hunt them. That's super helpful. It's super valuable, and it's so much easier than just trying to remember things off the top of your head. So those are some of the reasons why I love GPS mapping apps like onX Hunt so much. And I hope this has been helpful for you, not only to decide if the subscription is worth it, but also to help you understand just what sort of capabilities you are gaining when you download that software. I think a lot of people have a GPS mapping app, but they don't fully utilize it, or maybe they just don't realize what kind of potential it offers. As I'm wrapping up here, I'll leave you with a final thought. If you talk to hunters who were hunting 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, they might tell you how much time they spent poring over maps, taking notes, and scouting on foot. Now we have so much capability and intelligence available on our smartphones, it's really changed the game. Some people feel like it's made it harder to hunt because now everybody has the same information and can easily find a spot that used to be secret. And in some ways, I'm sure that's true. But for hunters who want to learn new skills and put in the time and effort, just like hunters have done for decades before us, I think there's still opportunities to create separation between yourself and others and to increase your consistency in your success. So whether you've been hunting for a while or are just getting into it, I recommend you get an affordable GPS mapping app subscription like onX Hunt and really start digging in. Of all the things you could spend your money on that will marginally affect the outcome of your hunt, this will actually make a difference. That's all for today. I'll catch you next week.